Meron, so good to have you back.
Thanks for having me back. It's a pleasure to be back. Coming into, at the time, actually, it was Dallas, Texas. We had first moved to Dallas, Texas before moving to Seattle. I was the only African in my classroom.
Wow.
Right? And I had an accent, perceived accent, whatever that meant in that environment. But I didn't see myself as any different. For me, what really propelled me to do the work that I do now in driving the cultural conversations and driving the cultural engagement forward is to really formalize it and to say, actually, there's so much there that we can do on a policy level, on an integration level. The genesis of all of that and the genesis of how are we getting people to engage with the African continent meaningfully and positively. And what I personally found is that it's not just ignorance, right? It's people just don't know that there are so many hidden gems about our continent.
If you had to describe your platform in 2 sentences, what would it be?
That's $1 million question, right?
Welcome in the Valley. I'm your host today, and my name is Ibrahim Sanya. We have an amazing show today, but before that, a gentle reminder. Press that subscribe button. Join the community of funders and founders, changing sports, tech, entertainment, and fashion from Africa to the rest of the world. And never miss a thing. Enjoy the show.
Meron, so good to have you back.
Thank you. So good to be back, Ibrahim.
Incredible. We're here in your home city number 2, Joburg. So why don't we get a chance to discover the origin stories of Meron? Who are you and what took you here in this country and around culture and conversation?
Sure. So thanks for having me back. It's a pleasure to be back. Very excited to be engaging. So in terms of my story and my journey, as I had mentioned the last time very briefly, I'm from Ethiopia, left Ethiopia when I was about 4 or 5, then moved to Kenya, lived in Kenya, and then grew up in the United States, East Coast as well as West Coast. So I grew up in the West Coast and then...
Which cities?
So Seattle.
Okay.
Grew up in Seattle, went to school in Los Angeles.
Okay.
Then moved to New York.
Okay.
So kind of all over the place. And then moved to South Africa 10 years ago.
Wow. And were high school years in the U.S.?
It was, yeah. Middle school, actually elementary school, middle school, high school, and then university. Yeah.
So how was the transition coming from Kenya with a series of classmates that looked just like you to arriving in the U.S., where there was a broader diversity and probably a lot of unknowns?
Yeah, that's always an interesting question because we laugh about our little selves, not so little, but little enough, right? Where you go into a completely new environment, completely new cultural environment, right? So, coming into, at the time, actually, it was Dallas, Texas. We had first moved to Dallas, Texas before moving to Seattle. And I was the only African in my classroom.
Wow.
Right? And I had an accent or perceived accent, whatever that meant in that environment. But I didn't see myself as any different, right? I just knew that kids would make fun of me, right? They'd say, wait, what? What are you saying? And then I'm looking at them like, you're the one that's not speaking properly, not me. I'm speaking just fine. So, obviously there are a lot of cultural nuances that were very different, but I think you're too young to understand what's happening.
Okay.
And it was only until I got to middle school and so forth where I actually realized, I guess, I'm being teased because perhaps I speak different, or perhaps there are different cultural things that are happening, right? Like I used to get called African booty scratcher,
Yeah,
those things.
We've all been there.
Yeah.
We've been all there. And I understand that while you were in the U.S. in school, you actually played a lot of sports.
I loved sports recreationally. I ran, I loved basketball, watching basketball. I went to a lot of schools that were very big on sports. So just naturally, I just found myself engaging with it peripherally or actually playing in the sport, right? So basketball was one of my favorites. Again, recreationally, not on a team. And that was a lot of fun. And just to kind of, watch that journey and then go to a university that was very, very big on sports, right?
And where was this?
USC.
USC.
Yeah.
All right. And your love for basketball obviously continued because last time we were in South Africa last year.
Yeah.
And we're looking for a spot to hold our event for the Tigers during Super Return. You're the one that helped us find a spot with the school here because you are basically the basketball mama
of my kids,
of
right?
your kids.
Trying to force them into it, Yeah, right.
So nothing gets lost. That's how I discovered your ties to sport because I saw how close you are. Now, what in that past, being in the US, in those colleges, in those high school, prepared you for your life when you arrived in Johannesburg?
Yeah. So in terms of just tying it to the work that I do now, which is focused purely on how do we, as a continent, leverage our culture and our creativity to enhance regional integration and to drive economic growth across the continent, right? So I've always been fiercely passionate, first and foremost, about anything and all things related to the continent. Just to take a little bit of a step back, even when I wasn't working in a creative and cultural sense, right, I always somehow found an opportunity to integrate, the African culture through whether it's music, whether it's through the culinary, whether it's through the art, whether it's through the history. Very much involved with a lot of affinity groups that were pushing for the African cause. So whether it's driving private sector growth towards the continent, while we were in New York, for example, whether it was being involved with an organization and finding some way to say, all right, I think we can include the African element, the cultural element in here, whether it was formally or informally. I was just always very passionate about the continent, right? And then fast forward, I realized actually we're always thinking about the cultural landscape, the African cultural landscape and the creative landscape as a periphery. And we're always thinking about it and engaging with it on the sideline. So we all appreciate it. We love it. We're dancing, we're looking at the art. We have the fashion. But what does that actually mean in terms of translating it into the economic discourse as well as the policy discourse, right? Which was always not there. And so for me, what really propelled me to do the work that I do now in driving the cultural conversations and driving the cultural engagement forward is to really formalize it and to say, actually, there's so much there that we can do on a policy level, on an integration level. We just need to be a lot more deliberate and intentional about how we're engaging with it.
Wow. Now, just before you founded your company, was there a moment in your previous jobs where there was triggers, where there was a call when you were standing and you were like, you know what, I have to do this in its fullness, not partially, not just thinking about it? And how did it go from your heart to your head and to your hands? What triggered that sequence?
Yeah, I think that it was something that was just somehow always in me. It was this burning thing that was there, waiting to explode and waiting to expand and waiting to find its own journey. And so it was entertaining it by bringing some really phenomenal people together and saying, let's engage around this subject, right? And sometimes you don't know what the end product looks like. You just know that you need to get there. And the first step is just actually going out there and doing it. And so for me, it wasn't really a 1, 2, 3, this is how it's going to go. It was sort of entertaining it outside of my mind and saying, let me just execute it. And it's interesting because when you look at, for example, the logo right? Which was done literally overnight just to get it going. And where we are now in terms of the pivot that we've done and, all of those things, it's night and day. But that's because at that moment, I recognized that I couldn't wait for perfection. I just needed to go. And I needed to bring these people together, test out the idea of what does a convening look like where it's purely focused on engaging around the cultural and creative industry across the continent. So slowly but surely, I saw that actually this thing, people are hungry for these types of conversations, bringing the business community together with the cultural community and ecosystem together, with all these different diverse sectors together, and saw that actually there was so much hunger in that. We obviously did a few programs here in South Africa before then going out to the rest of the continent, Ghana being our first outside of South Africa expansion. And the excitement was there, the energy was there, the audience was there, captive. And I remember the constant feedback was, it's great how you were able to infuse these different sectors together, but yet a common goal, which was, how do we take our cultural heritage a lot more seriously than we do?
Amazing. So if you had to describe your platform in 2 sentences, what would it be?
My elevator pitch?
Yes.
Sure. I would say it is an organization that focuses on driving the cultural conversation and cultural objectives of our continent forward from an economic and regional integration through various activities, through convenings, through education, through supporting our heritage and preserving our heritage. And how do we treat this as essentially an asset class?
Excellent. Why don't you give us an example of some of your past customers and what you had to do for them?
Sure.
So that the audience can know where to find you so they can get the same or better.
Yeah. So, I mentioned pivoting earlier, right? So initially when we started, it was purely focused on convenings. It was, let's get as many people on board so that we can engage around this sector. COVID happened.
Yes.
As it happened to everybody. And convenings were not a thing. So constantly had to think about, okay, well, what is that next thing, right? We all then shifted digitally, but then you have digital fatigue, right? People were tired by the end of, Q4 2020. Yes. So the digital convenings were no longer the thing anymore because everyone was exhausted. So then it was, okay, well, how do we then pivot? What is that thing, right? So we started off with our engagements, right? Physical engagements, then shifted to the digital, but then what next? So constantly asking the what next. And then it was further crystallizing and sharpening what is the impact that we want to have, right? Advocating for this space, engaging in various initiatives where we work with what we call them the featured culturalists, right? Okay. People in the art world, culinary artists, designers, etc., right? And then it was, okay, we're starting to see this momentum. And then it was, what else? It was, let's advocate by engaging about this sector through thought leadership. Great. Okay, and then what else, right? So then the genesis of all of that and the genesis of how are we getting people to engage with the African continent meaningfully and positively in a way that'll actually get them to move their wallet towards various African countries was, we then launched the Africa Culture Collection. And the idea behind that is, how do we get people to learn about the continent cross-generational? Young people all the way to people like you and I, right? Where there's so much about our continent that we don't know. And what I found is that customers, as you say, they don't engage with things that, number one, they're uncomfortable with, number two, that they don't know. So for us, it was, all right, well, how do we convert that customer to get to know the African continent? How do we convert that customer so that they're a lot more comfortable with vacationing, as we talked about in the last episode, right? And consuming more of Africa and being obsessed with the great things that the continent has to offer. And what I've personally found is that it's not just ignorance, right? It's people just don't know that there are so many hidden gems about our continent across the different pillars, fashion, tourism, et cetera, right? Food even. So we then launched Get to Know Africa series, which is our way to convert the customer to engage with the continent more thoughtfully.
In today's episode, we support Cultures and Conversations on Africa, a platform that brings together leaders in business, government, arts and culture to elevate the cultural economy across the African continent. C&C recently launched Get to Know Africa initiative, which aims to be a one-stop repository for African history and culture to enable the audience to get to know Africa's 54 countries in a constructive manner. Get to know Africa and support the movement. We are big fans.
Well, tell us more about Get to Know Africa.
Sure.
I've seen this with great enthusiasm and curiosity, and I would love you to share with our audience.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity. So, for example, we have, and so when we thought about this, for me, when I thought about this, it was thinking about it from a lens of a consumer, as most ideas get birthed, right? Because you go somewhere and you see that thing doesn't exist, or it doesn't speak to you in the way that it's delivered. And so for me, I always had in the back of my mind, what I would want if I did something like this, what would I want it to look like, right? Based on the various offerings that I've received before that I wasn't necessarily satisfied with, right? And the way that you engage with your friends or children, etc., where you want them to know about the continent, you want them to know about the flags, a little bit more educated about our continent. And so I always struggled, like when I was thinking about gifting, whether it's in a corporate sense or in a personal sense, I always struggled to get Africa-friendly products. So then it was, all right, we'll do something about it, right? This is it. So so the idea is then this coloring book. And again, it says here, Get to Know Africa coloring book, discover the beauty of Africa's 54 countries. And so the idea is that you as a user walk away knowing the continent a little bit better and geography. So it's a coloring book, and we give you country insights, GDP rating, what is the currency, what is the main export. But beyond that, what's really exciting for me is, from a tourism perspective, is the capital city, right? We should all know what the capital city of our countries are. What is the major city? What is a tourist attraction? The bordering country, obviously, right? Because sometimes when we're planning, you're always thinking, okay, well, what's the next country I can jump over, right? So we thought, okay, this is a really good way to kind of feature the countries. And we have the different national symbols, right? And so every country, there's a page dedicated to each country, and that's what you get, and that's what you walk away learning about, right?
And he has facts about the country. So let's pick your home country, for instance.
Sure.
Ethiopia.
Okay.
What are the facts that you listed there?
Let's look at Ethiopia, and let's look at how we've positioned Ethiopia. All right. So the currency birr. What is the capital city? Addis Ababa. We have the different tourist attractions. So we have Bale Mountains National Park, right? We have Semen Mountains National Park, which is in the north of Ethiopia. We have, obviously, the bordering countries. We have the various tourist attractions, again, in the north. We have the Lalibela.
I've been there.
Great.
I've been to 4 of these.
Tell us about what your experience was.
So, I think this was before COVID. My family and the family of friends from the US that we've been friends with 2 decades, They were Pakistani American, but grew up in Senegal. And we actually took a vacation together with their kids and our kids for about 9 days. And we did 4 cities. We went to Lalibela. We were obviously in Addis. But it was organized so diligently that there was actually a spreadsheet for each day. And every 2 days would be in a different city. And each of the touristic location we would see would link us back to the history of the country.
Oh, great.
And it was splendid, especially at the time. I think I had recently moved to Egypt. It was great to see a lot of the sites that you hear mention or reference in the Bible or the Quran, which was very enlightening for me and also for my family, because we tend to think about religious book as centered around maybe Jerusalem or Italy. For instance, the Bible would be thinking mentally Italy because of Rome. And you realize that the core content of those stories reside effectively between Ethiopia, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Jerusalem area. And that basically most of the content, if not 100%, is strictly around those 4 countries. So it's great to actually experience the location firsthand.
Yeah.
And you don't think of going to Ethiopia to experience.
Right, exactly.
Whether it's Christianity, Islam, but most of those prophets, when you think about it, there's a lot of mention of Ethiopia in the stories.
Yeah.
So it's amazing to live it live.
Right, and to experience it. And you've just said it, which is, a lot of times we don't think about these things in this way from a historical perspective even, right? Until you actually are forced to engage with it.
Yes.
And that's really what this is all about, is how do we force people to engage with it so that they could gain some really, really great insights into our respective countries on the continent. So you're the first use case, except you did it on your own, not through this.
Right. This is superb. So I also see you have some cards. What are the cards about?
So again, right, as putting myself in the shoe of a consumer, where I felt every time I wanted to get something around the African continent, a game, something, I never could access those things, right? In wherever shops that I would go to look for these things, whether it was to gift or whether it was to use it for my own personal life. And I struggled to get these things. And the genesis behind this was really because, for example, we'll have road trips and you'll play, different games. What is the capital city of Burundi, Rwanda, South Africa, right? And then in my mind, I thought, actually, let's convert this into something that people could play with physically. So the idea was, how do we get people to engage with the continent again, meaningfully, where we're educating them about the particular country, right? Historical fact, did you know? But also that flag. So here, for example, we give you a tip, we give you some clues, population, capital city, the currency, this is the flag. You have to guess which country this is.
Okay.
And so that was really a way to get people to engage with the continent and countries of the continent in a really meaningful way. So I've had somebody use this, and this is a 12-year-old using this. And they now know all of the flags of the continent, right? Just in a matter of 2-3 weeks of playing with this.
These would be fantastic corporate gifts, also gift for family, and obviously the knowledge piece you get out of it is splendid. In fact, I think I am going to test you.
Okay.
Let me not tell you and see how you as a founder are knowledgeable about the 54. So this country is home to a lake with a body of water that is the lowest point in the African continent. And it's saltier than Israel Dead Sea. Which country might that be? Tip, the lake is called Lake Assal.
Can I see the flag?
No,
No.
Djibouti. Djibouti. All right. Good guess. Good guess.
All right.
All right. Yeah. Proof. Djibouti.
Nice. Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Let me test another one
Okay.
so that we see. So clearly you can see that the founder seems to know her countries.
I better.
The capital city of this country is situated on the westernmost point of mainland Africa, and is home to the tallest statue on the African continent.
Senegal.
All right. Good
Right.
guess. Good guess. I think just the point of being the westernmost
Gives it away, huh?
gives it away if you know the map.
Yeah.
So these are very, very, very great ways to get people to capture the continent. So
Yeah.
remarkable work.
Today's episode is sponsored by Statement. Statement is a media company focused on editorial coverage and market analysis of the African entertainment industry. Its production arm builds a pipeline for African women filmmakers. Magic Johnson, Samuel L. Jackson, and Latanya Richardson Jackson are among the investors that support the Statement's mission. We are big fans.
How about this? That seems to be a much bigger card.
It is. It is.
What is it?
Yeah. So this is. I'm really personally really excited about this. It's basically a 1,000-piece puzzle. So it comes in 300, 500, and then a 1,000-piece puzzle, right? And again, here is how do we get to know the continent through geography and through the flags. And engaging with it in a meaningful way so that, you know, whether it's you're in the classroom or whether you're at home with friends and family over a break and you're building this 1,000-piece puzzle. And hopefully by the time you've built this puzzle, you would have known which country falls where and what their flags look like.
Wow, 1,000 pieces. Wow,
so that was
incredible.
sort of the idea behind this
cool.
puzzle.
Super cool.
Is to engage the mind in different ways.
Super cool.
Yeah.
Super cool. I would assume that all of these, we soon will be able to get them ordered on Amazon or on a website. But I would assume that, is there any ways for any of these to be, for instance, downloaded, like you download an ebook? Because that would probably ease on the logistics side, considering that you and I know that Africa, in terms of getting anything delivered, can sometimes be a headache. So what's the plan?
Yeah, no. So we've thought about a lot of these bottlenecks, right, in terms of distribution, shipping, you know, et cetera. So in terms of, you know, we're launching this on the Africa Culture Collection site, where it's the online shop. And then obviously we'll use other platforms like Amazon and such to distribute seamlessly. But this is phase one. So phase two, which we're thinking about right now, is how do we create all of these in a digital way so that you engage with it as a user digitally. So to try to target different segments, you know, through different channels. So absolutely to the digital domain for this.
Super cool. No, really, really excited. I'm ready for my first order.
Nice.
And in fact, talking about first order,
Yeah.
I have my first set of T-shirts representing
Way to go,
Senegal.
Ibrahim, representing Senegal.
So tell us about the gears.
Yeah. So again, as I mentioned, for me, it was very important to think about different ways to engage the user. And hence why you have a coloring book, and then you have the flag game, and then you have the puzzle. And so it was, all right, how do we get people to engage with the flags of the countries? And people love T-shirts. It's easy. It's very simple. So the idea is when I'm engaging with you, it becomes a conversation piece, right?
Yes.
Culture and conversations on Africa. So it becomes a conversation piece. I look at it, and obviously the back of your shirt, it says Senegal.
Yes.
I then walk away, hopefully, knowing what the flag of Senegal looks like. So it's how do we target people and how do we engage people differently so that in different ways, what are the different touch points so that we can get them to engage with the African continent and the African countries?
Great. And I see you have a whole series. There's like some hoods.
That's right.
There's
Yeah.
some t-shirt, gray like the one I got, white. So which countries do you have up there?
So we have so the idea is that obviously it's from children all the way to adults. We have hoodies, sweatshirts, t-shirts, blue, gray, white.
Yeah, clearly that first one has to be children because I will not fit in that.
Yeah, exactly. You and me both. So we have Angola there. We have Ethiopia, South Africa, DRC, Ghana, Ivory Coast. So yeah, most of the countries, but it's 54 countries represented. That's the idea, is that you as a consumer would be able to purchase whichever country you want to represent.
Amazing. Really, really exciting stuff. Now, going forward, what's the plan for Culture and Conversation? Where do you see it going? Where I see that you've expanded to Ghana, and I know that you're always traveling. Last time you were in Egypt, and we did miss each other, you and I, when you came. However, I know that this passion is just at the beginning. It's the fire in you. What's the tomorrow?
That's $1 million question, right? So, again, it's constantly pivoting. It's constantly thinking about ways for us to drive more African consumption and defining what that African consumption looks like for our respective countries and for our integration, especially in a world where we're living. It's so chaotic. So much is happening, right? So how can culture be sort of the catalyst to integrate us a lot better and a lot quicker? And obviously, as Africa Culture Group, we're thinking about different ways to engage. We have Africa Culture Group, and falls under it is Culture and Conversations on Africa, and then obviously the Africa Culture Collection. So it's thinking about how can we drive the cultural agenda of our continent forward. So, we're working with different partners to move these conversations forward, to move these initiatives forward. So constantly thinking about what does it mean for us to use our cultural creativity to create more jobs, to create more growth. And so that's kind of where we are, is thinking about lots of initiatives. So stay tuned.
Beautiful. I remember in our first conversation in the previous episode, you referred to your mom as being a great point of influence. Can you take us to a moment where the time you spent with her did influence your actions the most? I also know that when you were younger, you did spend a great amount of time with her. I understand you're one of how many kids?
7.
Oh, 7.
Yeah.
And you are the youngest.
I'm the youngest, yeah.
So how did that time spent extensively with her influence you? And what would you say are 3 values that are deeply embedded in you as a result of that role model?
Do we have enough time, Ibrahim? I can talk about my mom for hours. Yeah, she's such a remarkable woman. As I'm sure, many of us appreciate our moms. What I really appreciate so much about her is, number one, she was just so fierce. She's just fierce. She's committed to everything that she does. She's very honest about what she does, right? And she does it in a way that You see her passion. You see her loyalty in the things that she does, and loyalty in the people that she engages with, whether she knows them very well or just engages them superficially, whatever that means. So I think, those nuggets, those life lessons of how do you stay committed to your purpose? How do you not give up? That was a very big thing. My mother never gave up, despite whatever obstacles, despite whatever hardships, whatever it was, she just never gave up, right? And just seeing her passion. And as you can appreciate as an entrepreneur, right? You can't give up. You have to keep going. And I think, when I have my moments of, oh my goodness, this is a bit challenging, she looks at me and she's like, please get it together, so I think about her as an inspiration, and that you just keep going. And obviously from a love for all things Africa and culture and, my identity as an African, I mean, that she's really she is that person, that gave birth to that. And I think I do what I do today because of her, because she instilled this passion that I have today for the continent. And those are, I think, the three things: is passion for the continent and who you are as an African, perseverance, and loyalty. Loyalty, whether it's to your relationships, or loyalty to your work, and loyalty to your passion. Yeah.
Beautiful. Meron, always when we meet you, ignite the light that we need to see on the continent. We hope you continue to shine all across. You have 54 babies to shine on.
A lot of babies, a lot of work.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you so much, Ibrahim. Thank you for having me. And thanks for the work that you do in sharing the stories and spotlighting people who are at the forefront of trying to make things happen.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to work with you. We'll keep on doing more together, and I'm sure we're going to have you for a third episode soon.
By God's grace. Super looking forward to it.
Amen. Thanks. You.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, if you like today's story, press like, leave a comment, subscribe, come back for more stories from founders and funders changing the face of sports, tech, entertainment, and fashion from Africa to the rest of the world. We look forward to seeing you again soon.